The Abbott government is struggling to smooth some early bumps in relations with crucial neighbour Indonesia, in particular over those spying allegations from the Australian Embassy in Jakarta. The Foreign Affairs Minister, Julie Bishop, is in Bali for crucial talks on that front. Also in Bali is retired Lieutenant General Agus Wijoyo, a senior figure in the Indonesian military for many years. He's now a prominent writer on defence and diplomatic affairs, and he joins us from the Bali Democracy Forum. Lieutenant General, thank you for your time. First, could you give us your read on how things are going in the Jakarta-Canberra relationship?
As in any bilateral relations that are encountering new administration in one of the sides or in both sides, of course, there are changes when there are changes of administration. This, I mean, also especially true from the Australian side, because the Australian side has had a new Prime Minister coming in with, of course, new policies, but also outside of that, there may be some other issues that can bear quite a large influence on the bilateral relations between the two countries.
What's your judgment specifically on the allegations that Australia has been spying in part on behalf of America from our embassy in Jakarta? Do you see those as particularly damaging?
What we call a spying, if what we call a spying is a form of information collecting system, then it is a reality of its existence. As long, I think, as it is used to support, to enhance the bilateral relations of any two countries. But because of the nature of quote-unquote spying as covered, it may have some negative implications in the relations between Indonesia and Australia, especially from my personal opinion is that in the new, more transparent and democratic Indonesia, is not the formal channels of communication sufficient enough to gather informations between the two countries in their bilateral relations, so that one have to resort to the covert model of what we know as spying.
Do you have some sympathy for Australia carrying out some covert surveillance from the Jakarta embassy?
It would be, again, back to my question, is not a more democratic and transparent Indonesia be sufficient enough in providing its open communication channels to other countries in gathering their informations, in the support of the respective bilateral relations? What is there that cannot be accommodated in the open communications channel in this more democratic and transparent Indonesia? I can understand if that had happened in the past regime of a closed authoritarian and centralistic system. But in a democratic and transparent Indonesia, what more are required that cannot be accommodated in the open communication channels?
The Foreign Minister from Indonesia, Mr. Natalegawa, has requested, I think, assurances from Australia that there won't be ongoing surveillance in this regard. What must Australia now do, do you believe, to move on from this impasse?
The problem, if issues such as spying occurs between two nations or two countries, it has its implications on trust between the two parties concerned. So when that happens, what is required to be done now is to conduct some damage controls in rebuilding the trust between the two nations.
Do you believe that Indonesia sees a need now perhaps to draw back on cooperation in some other areas, for example, in dealing with people smuggling or anti-terror measures, to express its displeasure?
Of course, as the general wisdom says, we cannot choose our neighbors. We may be able to choose who our friends are, but we cannot choose who our neighbors are. So we would have to get along, whether there are differences or whether there are more of commonalities between neighbors. So in that sense, this will put also more pressure how the positive bilateral relations has to be maintained and trust is to be built in the relations between the two nations and not to be influenced by activities which may compromise that type of trust.
So do you believe it is likely Indonesia will in fact limit some sharing of intelligence and cooperation in other areas to express its disgust in this regard?
I think the current Indonesia is a more democratic and transparent than the political system of the past. And anything that can be provided to enhance in the bilateral relations, I think at least it could be more easily be reached compared to the last system. But again, we see that international relations is a meeting between national interest of the country parties involved. So there we would have to understand the nature of the communication based on the foundations of trust between any bilateral relations between.
Lieutenant General, you mentioned the fact that Australia has a new government at play in this relationship earlier. How well or otherwise do you think that new government has handled relations with Jakarta in its first few months in office?
I think I see the developments are promising enough. We understand fully how new administrations or new government has some ideas of how to conduct their policies. And of course, because this lies in the domain of politics, it cannot be separated from the promises that they have issued to their constituents. But as long as there are or as there is political will and open communication channels, I think anything can converge and build understanding of how to cooperate in those policies that interact in the circles of interest between the two neighbouring countries.
To close, Lieutenant General, you bring both an understanding of military cooperation as well as diplomacy. How feasible is it for the Tony Abbott government here in Australia to expect Indonesian cooperation for its plan to tow back people smuggling vessels to Indonesian waters?
Again, as I have said, as long as the two governments are willing to open communication channels and to talk to each other, I believe that there are some points of understanding and meeting points as to reach the operational level of how to cooperate with each other. Because in conducting cooperation or implementation of these policies, which has to be reciprocal in nature, there may be some instances or situations which are different from the Indonesian side compared to from the Australian side. So it requires time to be adjusted so that it can create a bridge that can connect those differences between one country and the other.
Lieutenant General Agus Wijoyo, thank you for coming on the program today.
Thank you. It's my honor and pleasure. Good luck.